What's the difference between a dialect and a language? Seems pretty easy, right? If we're speaking and we can understand each other, we must be speaking different dialects of the same language. But if we can't understand each other, they must be different languages entirely. This idea is called mutual intelligibility, and it seems logical, but it doesn't work. Take, for example, Arabic, which is often misconstrued as a single language, but is actually a dialect continuum. This is when many different varieties of a language are similar when they're geographically close to each other, but very different when they're far apart. For example, a Lebanese speaker can probably understand an Egyptian, who can probably understand a Tunisian, who can probably understand a Moroccan. So, by mutual intelligibility, you would think that these should all be counted as the same language. But here's the thing, a Lebanese speaker probably can't understand a Moroccan, so then mutual intelligibility tells us they should be different languages. So mutual intelligibility here falls apart. But despite the fact that there's so many varieties of Arabic, it's still considered one language. Why? Well, it might not be linguistics, but instead it could be because of cultural, political, historical, religious reasons. To Arabs, it might make more sense to unite commonly under one language.
Huh, that was weird. The exact same thing can be said for Chinese. If you ask any Chinese-speaking person, they will say that Chinese is a singular language with many different divergent dialects that are united by writing system. But is this really true? This is taking into assumption that all the different Chinese dialects have the exact same words or the exact same lexicon. Let's take the sentence, for example, I speak Chinese like this in my father's dialect, Singaporean Hokkien, and in Standard Chinese. 我喜欢你看广华歌 and 我是这样说中文的. In those two sentences, the words 安你宽 and 这样, which both mean like this, aren't even related to each other in that they didn't originate from the same characters in the first place, and 安你宽 doesn't even have a standard way of being written. And so in that sense, could you really consider them the same language?
Take some other examples that linguistically complicate things. For example, Hindi and Urdu are remarkably similar, sometimes just called Hindustani. But Hindi is spoken predominantly in India and written with the Devanagari script, whereas Urdu is spoken predominantly in Pakistan and written with the Perso-Arabic script. Because of the political tensions between these two countries, they're often considered different languages. Or take, for example, Scandinavia. Swedes and Norwegians, and to a lesser extent Danes, can understand each other with very little problem, and yet they're still considered different languages. As much as we'd like to act as if linguistics is some objective scientific measure, it's just not. At the end of the day, linguistics is the study of human language, which is a reflection of human culture, and that's really subjective. What right does a linguist have to go to, say, Morocco and say, actually, you're not speaking Arabic, you're speaking an Arabo-Amazigh blend, which is a totally different language? Or imagine if a linguist went to Scandinavia and said, you're not speaking Norwegian and you're not speaking Swedish, you're actually speaking modern Norse. It's not fair, because calling something a language gives it power. As a final example, I want to talk about Scots. Not Scottish English, but Scots, which is a language spoken in modern-day Scotland that descended from Old English. But here's the thing, if you ask many people, mostly English people, they'll often tell you that Scots isn't a language in its own right, but it's actually a dialect of English. But think about what you're saying there. You're stripping an entire people's independence away from their culture. In the modern day, English holds a lot of political power. So when English says that something's a dialect, most people will regard it as a dialect. But this is not a good thing. When a group of people tell us that they're speaking a different language, we should respect those wishes. Because a language is a reflection of identity and a reflection of culture. And who are we to deny that? There's a really well-known quote that summarizes this idea nicely. A language is a dialect with an army and a navy. And remember, just because it's true, doesn't mean that it's right.